Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for What If Episode 3, What If Earth Lost Its Mightiest Heroes? Or at least something close to that, if that's not actually the title. Definitely my favorite episode so far. I mean, I'll always have a place, of course, for, please stump on me, Captain Carter, but Episode 3 is definitely my favorite one. Like, the murder mystery element, what in the world's going on here, the way that they kill the people off, I think, once they get to, like, the third death, it gets really intense after that because I was like, okay, the first one was like, okay, it seems like a poison. It's kind of just like he freaks out. It's like, oh, he was poisoned. Like somebody put something in the syringe and it killed him. And then the second one was just like, okay, well, Bart hit Thor with an arrow. Okay, it's crazy. He died, but it wasn't that crazy. And then it was like, Bart just dies. Like he's totally in there by himself. Nothing's happening. You don't see anyone or anything going on. And then he's just dead. He just slumps over and he's dead. I'm like, okay, now it's getting super mysterious because at first it was like, sort of a poison. And of course, they explained it later, like, well, it wasn't a poison. It seems more like a bullet basically came out of the syringe. But it seemed like, okay, poison, that's easy to explain. An arrow to the heart, very easy to explain. We see it right there. And then he's just dead. He's totally locked up in his cell all by himself. And then go in, Fury kind of kicks him on the leg. His hand just slumps over and his whole body falls. And I was like, okay, this is dark. This is getting real crazy now because I'm like, I don't understand how he could have possibly died. Like, I didn't figure it out really until, like, right until they got to the end. I was like, hold on a second. And I figured it out, like, basically a little bit before they showed it. But I love the way it was handled. And then, of course, the way Hulk died was super effed up. Like, he just keeps expanding. And the way they go into his eyes and stuff, like, he knows he's about to die. I was like, this is kind of effed up. And, of course, he explodes, but gotta keep it somewhat, kid friendly. So he of course explodes and it's just a big puff of smoke instead of what it really would have been, was just blood and guts all over the place. But man, it was a crazy episode. And then of course, it starts with Black Widow where they're like, okay, she totally did this, and then it's like, well, obviously she didn't, and so she's trying to figure out what happens. And as they go through, she figures out what ends up happening, but just as it's a little bit too late. And I was like, I don't understand what's happening. Like, she's fighting someone, but I'm like, is it telekinesis? Is the person invisible? I didn't get it. And then as they went through and it was like, it's all about hope, and that's, as they kept repeating, I was like, oh, it makes sense now. This person wasn't invisible, it wasn't telekinesis, it was someone who has the proportional strength of a man but the size of an ant. And I was like, genius. It was a really cool way to do it. I love how they handled that. And of course, this I think was the first episode where they kind of just kick things off, and it's just like, I forgot what the actual narration was, but they don't tell us, like, oh, well, what if Hope Van Dyne ended up becoming an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Like, they don't actually say that because then it would have made it easier. It's kind of just like, here's an episode, let's see what happens. Like, you have the title, of course, just What If Earth Lost Its Mightiest Heroes, but the actual moment, like, literally the first episode, it was just like, right here, this is the exact thing that changed, that made a divergent universe. They don't say any of that because, it was a murder mystery for the episode. And it was like, this is what would have happened if Hope had ended up going into the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I thought that was great. I love the way they handled it at the end. I love the fact that going through the death of the heroes actually coincides with the legitimate story of Thor. Like, it made perfect sense. I didn't even think of it because I'm like, okay, they're going to go through and it's going to be a bit of a murder mystery, but then it changes things because Thor dying is like, oh, well, they don't have time to go through the rest of the movie where it's like, okay, Thor does his little journey and then Loki's like, you banished my brother, and all this stuff is like, you banished and he's dead, and that's it. Like, like he's on Earth. That was day one. Like, he got banished to Earth and then he died on Earth instantly. A couple of hours changes the whole point of that entire film. They don't have time to go through the origins and Loki figuring out that he's a part of the Ice Giants and stuff, because I don't think that happens. It's been a long time since I saw the first Thor, but I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen until like maybe halfway through the movie before he actually realizes all that extra stuff. So he doesn't have time to know any of that, and it's just like, my brother died here. I'm gonna avenge his death, and we're gonna basically take over this planet. So I love the way they handled that. I was like, that's a very interesting way for this to play out. And then of course, Nick Fury realizes what's going on, and it's like, okay, well, what if we team up? And so, of course, Loki ends up taking over for Nick Fury when he actually goes to the gravesite. And I was like, something's weird. They kind of pulled a Spider-Man on us where I'm like, he's acting a little bit weird because he was being like super sarcastic. It was like, so that gave you the ability, the reason to kill everybody? And like, even just the pitch in his voice, I was like, this isn't how he acts. This is super weird. And so, of course, they end up fighting and he smacks him down. I was like, dang, he's good. It's Nick Fury. Okay. And then he did it a second time. I was like, this is Loki. As soon as he hit him that second time, I was like, this is Loki. And then like he literally like punched him as he was flying at him. I'm like, oh yeah, this is definitely Loki. And then of course he's like flipping over him and stuff. And I'm like, this is Loki. And then they make it super obvious. Like he starts teleporting and stuff like that. But I like the way they handled that for sure. And we see that it's Hank Pym. And I love that. I was like, it's a really effed up Hank Pym where he's pissed and he's angry and he's the one who has like the yellow jacket outfit and he's killing everybody. It's like, I lost my wife because of this, this line of like superhero work and stuff. And you knew that my daughter was in a delicate position because of everything that's happened. And you used that, like you brainwashed her into joining your little army, and then she died because of it. I lost her just like I lost my wife. And it's just Hank Pym by himself, and it's like you can totally see that happening because of his character. He was always kind of seen as the guy who either was kind of just mean in general, or people always kind of pushed him around like just a little bit. They kind of disrespected him a little bit, like the Pym particle stuff. I always felt like people knew what it was capable of, but he almost kind of never really got the respect that he technically deserved for it. And then, of course, once he lost his wife, it was kind of like he kind of took himself out of it as well, and people still didn't really respect him for everything that he had done, kind of up to that point. So it was kind of interesting seeing that. And then, of course, you add on top of him losing his wife and kind of backing out of the superhero game, his daughter joining it and then dying from it. I was like, it totally works. It totally makes sense. Love the way it was handled. I love the reveal. And then, of course, the ending with Nick Fury and Loki actually teaming up. And then, of course, Loki's kind of just like, this place is interesting. I might stick around for a bit. And then, of course, he takes over all of Earth. And I love that. I was like, that's a funny way to end it, where it kind of fast tracks the whole Avengers thing, where all the Avengers, of course, can't be put together because they've all been murdered. So then there has to be a new set of Avengers. And in this case, Nick Fury goes out to find Captain America himself. And he calls in Captain Marvel because he's going to need her help in order to take out Loki and all the Asgardians taking over Earth. So I thought that was a cool way to end it. Like every time they end it, episode 2 kind of ended where I was just like, I think they'll just all die. But episode 1 and episode 3 definitely ended where I was like, man, what are the actual Avengers in this version of the universe? And I know they get to that at some point. I kind of want to watch the trailer again just to see exactly which characters are there. But every time they end it where I'm like, Captain Carter being like the first Avenger, I was like, I would love to see her version of the Avengers, of course. And then, because that would change Iron Man as well, because they had basically a pseudo Iron Man suit. So that would change things because they would already have that prototype getting into Iron Man. And it would, like, there's so many elements that would change that. And then, of course, this one, the original Avengers are all dead except for Captain America, who's found at the end. And then Captain Marvel is brought in, which they'd probably take out Loki super fast. I mean, as powerful as she is, they'd probably be fine. That would probably end real quick. But 1 and 3 definitely end where I'm like, I would love to see that play out. I would love to see like this different set of Avengers. But really love the episode. Definitely super dark, and I love the murder mystery of it and people just constantly dropping off. Because I was curious. I was like, I wonder if they will actually kill everyone. And they actually kill every single one of them. Because I was like, okay, as it keeps going, like, okay, this person died, that person died, this person died. And then it was like, oh no, they're just killing them. Like, they're just dying. There is no like one person even made it. It was like Captain America was still technically like dead to the world at the time. So for him, it didn't really count. Everyone else was gone. Everybody else is just dead. So I'm like, man, this is super effed up. Like, they're all just dead. But I love the way they handled this episode for sure. I would love it if every episode, they can't do a murder mystery, every episode, but I would love to see some really divergent stuff, especially if it was dark. I love seeing things where it's like they take darker versions of stuff where it's like, oh, this isn't just, episodes 1 and 2 are like, oh, that's a different version of the story, but it's still like a nice, happy, upbeat story. This was the dark version of that. I'd love to see more dark stories. Like I mentioned, I think it was in my last review, Marvel Zombies, of course, I'm looking forward to. So I'm curious how that's going to play out. Like, do we see people turn into zombies? Because they're only, 30-minute episodes. So do we actually see someone kind of lose during an episode? Because it seems like, heck, we've only seen like one thing really from that, and it's Bucky going up against Zombie Cap. So it might follow Bucky the whole way through, but I assume we're going to see some of these people get turned into zombies, and we'll see people get killed off throughout that episode, and I would love to see it. So I'm excited to see how dark some of these episodes can get, because this was definitely the one that was like, hey, we know the first one was basically Captain America, but slightly different, and then the second one was Guardians of the Galaxy, but smarter, because you had T'Challa instead of Star-Lord. And then this one was just like, what if it was just sad and effed up? And it was like, it's entertaining. So I'd like to see more stuff like this. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be just, what if we killed a bunch of these people off or something? It could just be a darker version of things playing out. But really enjoyed this one. Definitely my favorite out of the 3 so far. But we'll love to know what you guys thought about this episode. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, your least favorite parts about it. And of course, did you figure out the mystery before we got there? Did you figure it out early on? Did you figure it out as they were kind of giving the hints? Like I said, I didn't until they were like, oh, it's all about hope. And I'm like, okay, she fought someone that wasn't really invisible. They were just tiny. Like, I got it. So we'd love to know how you guys felt about that one. The Hulk's death, that was definitely the craziest one for me, but I would love to know what you guys thought about that. Them going back to the Hulk movie, I mean, it's just crazy. They did it, period, and it was just like, well, that's crazy. They just don't talk about that. They don't reference it. They don't make fun of it. It's just gone. And then they finally went back, and it was like, wow, this wasn't like they're in the Hulk movie and it's somewhere else. It was like, no, that's what the place looked like. They did the actual battle where he's like on the glass bridge and everything. I was like, they were like, nope, it's the actual Incredible Hulk film. It's not just like the Incredible Hulk film. And then they made it look totally different. It was like, nope, it's in the same area. It's in our universe. We'll acknowledge it. So I thought that was cool. I appreciated that because I'm like, it just kind of exists. But I was like, okay, they do know it exists. They are paying attention. So that's kind of nice. We'll see if we actually get the actress for Betty Ross to come back. It wasn't her in the doing the voice work for the episode, but they do have her dad, like Thunderbolt Ross. He's been in like 3 or 4 movies at this point, and everybody, I remember when he first showed up, everybody was like, oh, so they do care. Like, that was the one acknowledgement, but even then it was always just like, they basically never made it even seem like he knew who Banner was. Like, they never allowed him to really reference Banner as the character that he completely hates. They don't ever, even in the movies when he showed up, he was just the military guy. He wasn't like, oh, here's Banner. Banner wasn't even in it. Now that I think about it, when he first showed up, I think that was after Avengers. Yeah, it was after Avengers 2. So I think that was the first time he showed up. So technically the Hulk hadn't even been in any of the movies. They weren't in the same movies together. So that was their easy out for that. But we'll see what happens going forward. I'm still waiting on that. I hope they do Red Hulk at some point. I want to see more Hulk stuff. They're doing She-Hulk, so at some point they're going to be like, yep, we're just rolling through it. I want to see that at some point. I really do. Maybe they'll do it in What If. I would love that, but I don't think they will because that's such a great story. That's something that's worth saving, if not for a movie, at least for one of the shows. Like, it would kind of have to be a show. It would be too short to do it for a movie, but man, I would love to see that. But anyway, really enjoyed this episode. Like I said, I want to know what you guys thought about it, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.